I never thought money could change people that drastically, but grandfather knew better. When he passed away and left me $2.9 million, my previously distant relatives suddenly became my best friends. They showed up at my doorstep with fake smiles and calculated hugs, thinking they could manipulate me into sharing the wealth. But grandfather was always 3 steps ahead. He had included one final clause in his will that none of them saw coming, a clause that would protect me from their greed and teach them a lesson they would never forget. If you are watching this right now, go ahead and drop a comment, letting me know where you are tuning in from, and make sure to hit that like and subscribe button as I tell you the story of how my grandfather's final act of love exposed my family's true colors and changed my life forever. I grew up with a special bond with my grandfather, William. My parents were busy corporate lawyers who traveled constantly, so I spent most weekends and summers at Grandpa's farmhouse in rural Pennsylvania. While my parents chased career success in Philadelphia, Grandpa taught me practical skills and life values. He was a self-made man who built a successful construction company from nothing, but you would never know it from his modest lifestyle. Grandpa lived in the same 2-story farmhouse he had purchased in his 30s. He drove a 10-year-old pickup truck, wore the same worn leather jacket for 2 decades, and considered dining out at the local diner a luxury. But beneath this frugal exterior was a man of incredible financial wisdom. Money is a tool, not an identity, he would tell me, while teaching me to repair the tractor or tend to his vegetable garden. The moment you let wealth define who you are is the moment you lose yourself. My name is Nathan, and unlike my parents or the rest of my extended family, I embraced Grandpa's philosophy. After college, instead of following the expected path into finance or law, I became a high school history teacher in a small town similar to the one where Grandpa lived. My parents were disappointed, my aunts and uncles bewildered. Why would someone from a family of successful people choose such a modest profession? The family gatherings at Thanksgiving and Christmas were exercises in thinly veiled judgment. My Uncle Robert, who ran a chain of car dealerships, would always ask when I was going to get a real job. Aunt Patricia, a real estate developer who married into wealth and leveraged it into more wealth, could not fathom why I lived in a small apartment when I could do so much better. My cousins, all pursuing careers in law, medicine, or business, treated me with a mixture of condescension and pity. Only Grandpa defended my choices. Nathan understands what really matters, he would say, much to the annoyance of his own children. He is rich in ways the rest of you might never comprehend. This only widened the gap between me and the rest of the family. Over time, our interactions became less frequent and more superficial. They invited me to fewer gatherings, and when they did, the conversations were strained and brief. By the time I turned 30, I was essentially estranged from everyone except Grandpa. We still met every other weekend, either at his farm or in my town halfway between our homes. He took a genuine interest in my teaching career, my modest community theater involvement, and my volunteer work with the local historical society. I was the only family member who visited him regularly during his final years, especially after Grandma passed away. When Grandpa was diagnosed with cancer at 84, the doctors gave him 6 months. True to his resilient nature, he lived for another 18, maintaining his independence almost until the end. I visited him more frequently during this time, helping with his garden and home maintenance, taking him to medical appointments, and simply sitting on the porch swing, listening to his stories. During one of our last conversations, he squeezed my hand and said something that would only make sense later. Remember, Nathan, people reveal their true nature when money enters the picture. Watch carefully, and you will see exactly who values what. I thought he was just sharing another piece of his homespun wisdom. I had no idea he was preparing me for what was about to unfold. Grandpa passed peacefully in his sleep on a Tuesday morning in October. I was the one who found him, having stopped by to drive him to a doctor's appointment. He looked serene, as if he had simply decided it was time to join Grandma. I sat with him for a long time before calling anyone cherishing those final quiet moments with the man who had shaped my character more than anyone else. The funeral was held that Friday in the small chapel near his farm. I was stunned by how many people attended. Neighbors, former employees, local business owners, and even students he had mentored decades earlier came to pay their respects. And of course, the entire family showed up, some of whom I had not seen in years. My parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins all expressed their condolences, but there was a palpable tension beneath the surface. Nobody mentioned the will directly, but sidelong glances and hushed conversations made it clear that inheritance was on everyone's mind. I found it distasteful, but Grandpa had warned me this would happen. I just did not realize how quickly it would start, or how dramatically things would change. The reading of the will was scheduled for the following Monday at Grandpa's attorney's office in town. I arrived 15 minutes early, surprised to find that every single family member was already there, some having flown in from across the country. The receptionist led us into a large conference room where Mr. Daniel's grandpa's attorney of 30 years waited with a thick folder and a solemn expression. "Thank you all for coming," he began after we had taken our seats. "William was very specific about his final wishes, and I will do my best to honor them exactly as he intended." He put on his reading glasses and opened the folder. The first part of the will was standard, covering funeral arrangements and personal effects. Grandma's jewelry went to my female cousins. His vintage car collection was divided among my uncles. His books and historical memorabilia came to me, which seemed fitting given my interests. So far, nothing surprising or contentious. Then Mr. Daniels reached the financial portion of the will. The atmosphere in the room immediately shifted, a collective intake of breath as everyone sat up straighter. I noticed my Uncle Robert actually leaning forward, fingers drumming impatiently on the table, regarding the distribution of William's financial assets. Mr. Daniels read, totaling $2,900,000. He paused as several gasps punctuated the air. Nobody had realized Grandpa was worth that much. His modest lifestyle had effectively concealed his true net worth. The entire sum is to be given to my grandson, Nathan James Wilson. Mr. Daniels continued, to be transferred in full with no restrictions on its use. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents exchanged shocked glances. Uncle Robert's face flushed deep red. Aunt Patricia's perfectly maintained smile froze in place. My cousins looked at me with sudden, intense interest, as if seeing me for the first time. "What about the rest of us?" Uncle Robert finally demanded. There must be something else. Mr. Daniels adjusted his glasses. William was very clear. The entirety of his financial assets goes to Nathan. He looked at me directly. He did, however, include a letter addressed to you that he asked me to give you privately after this meeting. The room erupted in protests and questions. My uncle demanded to know if the will could be contested. My aunt insisted there must have been undue influence. My cousins whispered furiously among themselves. Through it all, I sat in stunned silence, unable to process what had just happened. $2.9 million. It was more money than I would earn in my entire teaching career, Mr. Daniels weathered the storm of objections with professional composure, explaining that the will was legally sound, properly witnessed, and included a no-contest clause that would forfeit any potential inheritance if challenged. Eventually, the family's protests subsided into a simmering resentment directed squarely at me. After the meeting, my relatives filed out of the conference room without speaking to me. Only my parents lingered, their expressions, a complex mixture of disappointment and calculation. "We should discuss this as a family," my mother said, placing her hand on my arm. "Your grandfather surely intended for everyone to benefit. He clearly was not thinking clearly toward the end," my father added. "You know how confused elderly people can get." I gently removed my mother's hand. Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing. He was sharp until the end. You would know that if you had visited him more than twice in the last 5 years. Their expressions hardened at my response. My father cleared his throat. "We will talk about this later, when emotions are not so high." With that, they left, leaving me alone with Mr. Daniels. The attorney handed me a sealed envelope. "Your grandfather was a remarkable man," he said with genuine warmth. "He talked about you often, always, with great pride." I thanked him and took the envelope, but did not open it immediately. Instead, I drove to Grandpa's farm, now my farm, and sat on the familiar porch swing where we had shared so many conversations. Only then, surrounded by the essence of the man who had guided me through life, did I break the seal and unfold his final message to me. "Dear Nathan," it began in his distinctive handwriting. "If you are reading this, then Mr. Daniels has just informed the family about your inheritance. By now, you have probably witnessed the first transformation in how they see you. This is just the beginning." I paused, startled by his prediction, then continued reading. "I have left you my entire fortune, not only because you are the only one who truly shared my values, but because I know you will use it wisely. The others see money as a measure of worth. You understand it is merely a tool. However, there is one final lesson I want to teach through you, and it requires your participation." The letter went on to explain his plan, a test of character for the entire family that he had designed with meticulous care. It included specific instructions for me and a final clause that had not been revealed during the will, reading a clause that would only become active under certain conditions. I folded the letter, smiling despite my grief. Even from beyond the grave, Grandpa was still teaching, still guiding, still 3 steps ahead of everyone else. The transformation in my family's behavior was both immediate and remarkable. Within 24 hours of the will, reading my previously distant relatives began reaching out with sudden intense interest in my life. My phone lit up with text messages and calls. My email inbox filled with warm greetings and invitations. The first to appear at my door, quite literally, were my parents. They showed up unannounced at my apartment the next evening, with takeout food from my favorite restaurant and forced smiles. "We have been thinking," my mother said, as she unpacked containers of Thai food on my small dining table, "that we should help you manage this windfall. Financial planning has always been our strong suit." My father nodded in agreement. $2.9 million is a lot of responsibility for someone without experience in wealth management. "We could connect you with our financial advisor." I remembered Grandpa's letter and played my part. "That might be helpful," I said, noting how their expressions brightened. "I am not sure what to do with such a large sum." "Well, we have some ideas," my father continued eagerly. "Conservative investments, perhaps some real estate. You could even consider joining your mother's law firm as a legal assistant. Get your foot in the door of a real career." I nodded non-committally and asked questions that gave them the impression I was receptive to their guidance. When they left 2 hours later, they seemed confident they had established themselves as my primary financial advisors. Next came Uncle Robert, calling to invite me to a golf outing at his exclusive country club. Time we got to know each other better. "Nephew," he boomed over the phone, "a man in your position should expand his network. I know people who could really help you grow that nest egg." Aunt Patricia took a different approach, suggesting I might want to invest in her newest real estate development project. Guaranteed 20% return in 18 months, she promised. Family rates, of course. I would not offer this to just anyone. My cousins, who had previously barely acknowledged my existence at family gatherings, suddenly discovered a deep affection for their favorite cousin. Invitations to dinners, concerts, and weekend trips materialized. Each interaction was layered with suggestions about financial opportunities or offers of investment advice. Most transparent were my second cousins, Marcus and Laura, who had never spoken more than 10 words to me at any family event. They showed up at my apartment with a business plan for a startup they wanted to launch, complete with glossy presentations and projections, showing how my small investment of just $250,000 would turn into millions. Throughout these interactions, I played the role Grandpa had outlined in his letter. I appeared receptive, slightly naive, and genuinely considering their suggestions. I took notes during their pitches, asked questions that implied interest, and never directly refused any proposal. I was careful not to commit to anything, but left each family member believing they had the inside track to influence my decisions. 2 weeks after the will reading, I made my first significant move. Following Grandpa's instructions, I invited the entire family to dinner at an upscale restaurant, my treat. Everyone accepted with enthusiasm, arriving in their finest attire and warmest personalities. "I wanted to thank everyone for all your support and advice," I said once we were all seated. "I have been doing a lot of thinking about the inheritance and have made some decisions I would like to share with you." The table fell silent, all eyes fixed on me with barely concealed anticipation. First, I continued, "I have decided to take a year off from teaching to travel internationally. Grandpa always regretted not seeing more of the world, and I want to honor that wish for him." This announcement was met with forced smiles and concerned glances. A year of travel meant a year without access to my decision-making. "But do not worry," I added quickly. "Noting their discomfort, I will not be making any major financial decisions without consulting all of you. In fact, I have been thinking about some of your proposals." I then proceeded to mention each of their pitches, specifically giving each family member the impression that their idea was at the top of my consideration list. By the end of the dinner, everyone was visibly relieved and increasingly competitive, each trying to emphasize the superiority of their particular suggestion over the others. As we said our goodbyes in the parking lot, my mother pulled me aside. "You are making the right choice, including family, in these decisions," she said, squeezing my arm. "We only want what is best for you." I smiled and thanked her, knowing exactly what best for you really meant. Over the next month, the family courtship intensified. Birthday gifts arrived, though my birthday was 6 months away. Invitations to family events I had previously been excluded from suddenly appeared. My apartment building manager mentioned that several different relatives had stopped by when I was out bringing food, wine, or simply checking in. I continued the charade, gradually suggesting that I was leaning toward distributing portions of my inheritance among various family projects and investments. This hint of potential sharing only increased their attentiveness and thinly disguised manipulation. 3 months after the will reading, exactly as Grandpa had timed it in his instructions, I announced a family meeting at his farmhouse, now my farmhouse, to finalize my decisions regarding the inheritance. The invitation specified that attendance was mandatory for anyone wishing to be included in the financial disbursement plans. Not surprisingly, every single family member rearranged their schedules to be there. On the day of the meeting, I prepared the farmhouse according to Grandpa's detailed instructions. In the living room, I arranged chairs in a semicircle and set up a projector connected to my laptop. On the large oak dining table, I laid out folders with each family member's name containing documents that would soon become significant. They arrived in waves, each greeting me with excessive warmth. Uncle Robert clapped me on the shoulder like we were old fishing buddies. Aunt Patricia Eyre kissed my cheeks and commented on how responsible I had become. My cousins brought expensive bottles of whiskey and cigars, despite knowing I did not particularly enjoy either. My parents arrived last, my father carrying a leather portfolio that undoubtedly contained documents for me to sign. Before we begin, I said once everyone was seated in the living room, "I want to thank you all for your guidance these past few months. Your advice has been invaluable in helping me determine how to manage Grandpa's legacy." Nods and murmurs of approval rippled through the group. I noticed several subtle looks of triumph exchanged between various family members. "As you know, I have been considering how to allocate the inheritance," I continued. "After careful thought, I have decided on a plan that I believe honors Grandpa's wishes while also recognizing the importance of family." I clicked the remote and a spreadsheet appeared on the wall. It showed a breakdown of $2.9 million divided into various allocations. Significant portions were assigned to Robert's dealership expansion, Patricia's real estate development, Marcus, and Laura's startup, and other projects that had been pitched to me. There was even a line item for legal career development that made my parents lean forward expectantly. As you can see, I explained, gesturing to the projection, I have tried to include everyone's proposals in my plan. Each allocation represents an investment or gift that would help you achieve your goals while keeping the majority of the funds within our family circle. The atmosphere in the room was electric, a mixture of relief, anticipation, and barely suppressed greed. Uncle Robert was already mentally calculating his share. Aunt Patricia had her phone out, presumably to text her business partners the good news. My cousins were grinning broadly at each other. However, I said, my tone shifting slightly before I finalized these distributions. Grandpa left one additional requirement that must be addressed. I clicked to the next slide, which contained a single sentence, the final clause. Confusion passed across their faces. This had not been mentioned at the will reading. Grandpa included a private letter with his will, I explained, containing instructions that were to be revealed only at this moment. The letter specified that before any distribution of funds could occur, each potential recipient must complete a simple task. I walked to the dining table and picked up the stack of folders. In each of these folders is a document prepared according to Grandpa's instructions. It contains a record of your interactions with him during the last 5 years of his life. Specifically, it lists every visit, phone call, birthday card, or other contact you initiated with him. The room grew uncomfortably silent as I handed out the folders. Grandpa kept meticulous records, I continued. He noted every time any of you reached out to him, or more tellingly, did not. As they opened their folders, faces paled. Each document was painfully sparse, with many months showing no contact whatsoever. Below each record was a calculation of the hours spent with Grandpa versus hours spent working, vacationing, or on other activities during the same period. The final clause of Grandpa's instructions, I said, into the stunned silence, states that the inheritance distribution to each person must be directly proportional to the time and attention they gave to him while he was alive. I clicked to the next slide, which showed a very different allocation breakdown. Most family members had zeros next to their names. A few had token amounts. None had anything close to what had been shown in the previous slide. According to this metric, I continued, none of you qualified for any significant portion of the inheritance. In fact, most of you spent less than 10 hours with Grandpa in the last 5 years of his life combined. Phone calls lasting less than 5 minutes. Birthday cards with no personal messages. Christmas gifts mailed by assistants. Uncle Robert's face had turned from pale to red. This is ridiculous. I was busy building a business, something your grandfather understood perfectly well. Did he? I asked quietly. Because he documented 17 instances where he invited you to lunch, dinner, or family events that you declined due to work commitments. He also noted that you found time to take 3 extended golfing vacations during the same periods. Aunt Patricia snapped her folder closed. I will not sit here and be judged like this. William was not exactly easy to be around in his later years. By not easy, do you mean he would not invest in your development projects? Because he noted that too, including the 3 times you only called when you needed financial backing. One by one, each family member attempted to justify their absence from Grandpa's life, and one by one I countered with specific documentation that revealed the truth. My parents sat in rigid silence, their folder unopened between them, perhaps already knowing what it contained. So what now? My cousin Marcus finally asked. You dragged us all here just to shame us, to tell us we get nothing. Not exactly, I replied, moving to the final slide. Grandpa's actual final clause is this: the true inheritance I leave is not money but wisdom. Those who understand this have already received their share. I turned off the projector and faced my family directly. There will be no distribution, as shown in the first slide. Those calculations were never real, just a test to reveal intentions. I will be honoring Grandpa's wishes by using the inheritance in ways that reflect his values, not by dividing it among people who only showed interest in him after he was gone. The room erupted in anger. Accusations of manipulation, threats of legal action claims, of mental incompetence, all the reactions Grandpa had predicted in his letter to me. I let the storm rage around me, watching as masks of familial affection dropped completely, revealing the raw disappointment and entitlement beneath. When the shouting finally subsided, I spoke one last time. Grandpa wanted me to offer you something more valuable than money, a chance to rebuild genuine relationships based on something other than financial gain. Anyone interested in that kind of connection with me is welcome to stay for dinner. I will be in the kitchen preparing Grandpa's favorite meal. I walked out of the living room, leaving them to make their choices. Behind me, I heard the sounds of papers being crumpled, muttered curses, and the shuffle of people gathering their belongings. One by one, car doors slammed in the driveway as my relatives departed. Their brief, renewed interest in my life concluded as quickly as it had begun. No one stayed for dinner, just as Grandpa had predicted. It has been 2 years since that day at the farmhouse, and my life has transformed in ways I never expected. Following Grandpa's guidance, I kept my teaching job, but reduced to part-time so I could focus on the foundation I established in his name. The William Wilson Community Foundation now provides scholarships for local students, supports elder care programs, and funds practical skills, workshops that teach everything from carpentry to financial literacy, all reflecting Grandpa's values. The farmhouse has become a community gathering place, hosting seasonal festivals, workshops, and a weekly farmers market. The land that developers had eyed for years remains agricultural, with expanded vegetable gardens that supply fresh produce to local food banks and a small orchard that welcomes families for picking in the fall. As for my family, the aftermath played out exactly as Grandpa anticipated. Most cut ties completely after the meeting, unable to face either me or the truth about their behavior. Uncle Robert attempted to contest the will despite the no contest clause, but withdrew when his lawyer confirmed it was ironclad. Aunt Patricia spread rumors that I had manipulated a senile old man, but these gained little traction in a community where Grandpa had been respected for his sharp mind until the end. My parents took a middle path, maintaining minimal contact while keeping a careful distance from any authentic relationship. Our interactions are civil but hollow, a testament to what happens when connections are built on expectation rather than genuine care. Surprisingly, one family member eventually returned. My youngest cousin Ellie, who had been in college during Grandpa's final years and had the lowest expectations of inheriting anything, reached out 6 months after the meeting. Unlike the others, she came with an apology acknowledging that she regretted not spending more time with Grandpa and asking if we could connect as real family with no financial expectations. We started slowly meeting for coffee once a month. Over time, our relationship developed into a genuine friendship. She now volunteers at foundation events and has become a regular visitor at the farm, not for what she can get, but for what we can share. Last Christmas, she brought her new boyfriend to help decorate the farmhouse for the holiday community dinner, a tradition Grandpa would have loved. This experience taught me what Grandpa tried to show our family all along, that real wealth has little to do with bank accounts and everything to do with how we treat each other. The inheritance was never about the money, but about revealing character and priorities. Those who valued only the financial windfall revealed themselves just as thoroughly as those capable of valuing human connection. I sometimes wonder if any of the others will ever understand what they truly lost, something far more valuable than money. The opportunity to be part of something authentic, to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial advantage, to be seen and valued for who they are rather than what they can provide. That was the real inheritance Grandpa offered, and they rejected it for a chance at cash that was never coming their way. As for the actual money I live, much as Grandpa did modestly and purposefully. I drive the same car, live in the same farmhouse, and find joy in simple pleasures. The foundation work brings me far more satisfaction than extravagant purchases ever could. The wealth is a tool, not an identity, just as he taught me. In his final letter, Grandpa wrote, "Remember, Nathan, true inheritance is what we build in others. The values we instill, the character we help shape. Money is temporary, but wisdom properly planted grows forever." Every day, I try to live by those words, to be the kind of person who enriches others through connection rather than currency. Has anyone in your life taught you an important lesson about money or relationships? How did it change your perspective? Share your story in the comments below. If this tale of family inheritance and the true value of connection resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about life lessons learned the hard way. And if you know someone struggling with family dynamics around money, share this video with them. It might just give them the perspective they need. Thank you for listening. And remember that our greatest legacy is not what we leave in our bank accounts, but in the hearts of those whose lives we touch.